I think one other thing that, besides Jekyll and Hyde, another thing that this movie made me think about was The Day the Earth Stood Still, which is it's almost in a weird case because The Day the Earth Stood Still is about a benevolent alien who, again, comes from a very advanced race, and he comes to the planet Earth, and the ultimatum that he gives the Earth is that they either need to end their proliferation of weapons of war or else risk being obliterated by the space race, who aren't going to allow them to, as he says, extend their violence basically into the universe and outside of their own
nip
world.
Nip it in the bud, huh?
Right, try to nip it in the bud. And in the case of this movie, it's sort of an inversion of that, where now Gore is coming with the express purpose of not forestalling nuclear proliferation, but making it, accelerating it even further. Like his whole idea is to unify the nations of the world under an iron tyrannical grip, and then force them to, basically expand their imperial ambitions into the stars themselves.
Now this is my plan. I want all of your uranium, plutonium, all your atomic resources. I want your factories, railroad, shipping, all of your industrial facilities. Your workers will labor around the clock, day and night, following my blueprints to build the most powerful invasion force ever gathered in the universe.
You mean to enslave the world? Russia would never agree to it.
There's a simple answer to that. There'll be no Russia. Your United Nations building will be turned over to me. I will teach your engineers to build a fleet of interplanetary rockets, to be armed and manned by your joint military forces, all under my command.
What would you do with all this power?
I will return to my planet Arous. And through its vast intellect, I will become master of the universe. After I'm gone, your Earth will be free to live out its miserable span of existence as one of my satellites. And that's how it's going to be.
And I was thinking in context of, and in considering Vol, again, the benevolent contrary alien who doesn't really do anything to advance the plot except tell the humans to tell the humans what they need to do. But he is, it's almost as if you could see the movie as almost a satiric, response to the Day the Earth Stood Still, because The Day the Earth Stood Still is, it's often interpreted as this, a pacifistic film where the alien Klaatu becomes kind of like a messianic figure, someone who is persecuted for his message and nearly dies, but then rises into the heaven with this, this apocalyptic message of what mankind needs to do to avoid its utter ruin. But it occurs to me, and increasingly as I get older, that, the entire premise of The Day the Earth Stood Still is very cynical in the fact that basically its proposition of the only way to achieve a pacifistic, united world is to more or less
blow up the world. Yeah.
Well, to threaten it with like some sort of outside police force. Like that's the thing. Even Klaatu literally compares the robots that they build to put down aggression. And that's the other weird thing about the movie, is that like they boil it down to this idea of like we clamp down on aggression. We hate aggression, and therefore to fight aggression, we have built these perfect machines that will literally incinerate you the moment you step out of line.
I am leaving soon, and you will forgive me if I speak bluntly. The universe grows smaller every day, and the threat of aggression by any group, anywhere, can no longer be tolerated. There must be security for all, or no one is secure. Now, this does not mean giving up any freedom, except the freedom to act irresponsibly. Your ancestors knew this when they made laws to govern themselves and hired policemen to enforce them. We of the other planets have long accepted this principle. We have an organization for the mutual protection of all planets, and for the complete elimination of aggression. The test of any such higher authority is, of course, the police force that supports it. For our policemen, we created a race of robots. Their function is to patrol the planets in spaceships like this one and preserve the peace. In matters of aggression, we have given them absolute power over us. This power cannot be revoked. At the first sign of violence, they act automatically against the aggressor. The penalty for provoking their action is too terrible to risk. The result is we live in peace, without arms or armies, secure in the knowledge that we are free from aggression and war, free to pursue more profitable enterprises. We do not pretend to have achieved perfection, but we do have a system, and it works. I came here to give you these facts. It is no concern of ours how you run your own planet. But if you threaten to extend your violence, this Earth of yours will be reduced to a burned-out cinder.
So it becomes this thing where the supposedly, optimistic leaning messianic message of the movie is one that is predicated upon fascism. This idea that, that it's rejecting the idea of governments being a representation of the collective will of the people that can be turned towards pacifistic ends, and sort of solidifies this idea that, what is really necessary is a monopoly of power that comes from this big collective other that will just flatten all context and treat all cases as the same. And I think it even goes...
Well, they're very similar, though, but it's very interesting that there are different levels. Like this one, it's about enslaving the Earth so that they can amass all the uranium and enrichment.
Yeah, all the bombs.
So that we can go and fight the universe.
Yeah, conquer the universe.
The universe. And then there's more of a parasitic one, where, like, for example, in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where the bodies are, it's not a Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing, but in a way it is, but it isn't. You're actually being replaced completely.
Right.
But they're no emotion.
But it becomes
emotion.
Yeah, and it becomes a metaphor for this idea of, like, the terrifying fear of, what if you wake up the next morning and suddenly the people around you aren't, the people, like there's something in the ether that has produced it. Yeah, where there is, it's all the strontium-90 in your bones. Yeah, but there is something that produces a fantastical change in people. And I think I think that is an interesting way, like, with movies about alien invasion, because they're often so explicitly about a malevolent other from beyond the stars. They're a can of worms when it comes. They're basically a kind of distillation of a very xenophobic fear of anything that is outside, anything that is other to our American values. But when it comes to individual movies, like in that case, the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, you're forced to contend with the fact that the gothic horror of the movie is that all of these people are being replaced by aliens that look like them but have no emotional attachment whatsoever.
Right.
But then it becomes this thing where it's like, in one sense, the movie is obviously using this as a stand-in for, like, a kind of communism of this, this roboticized people that thinks only in terms of a collective hive mind and the expansion of its own interest to the exclusion of anything to do with the human spirit. Again, this very, very stereotypical and xenophobic view of the Soviet Union as it was explicitly framed in propaganda at the time. But then, as I said to you once after we had watched the movie, I just brought up the point is that, like, there's no reason to suspect that just because this collective, this hive mind lacks emotion, that they're necessarily going to produce a worse society than the one where we aren't a collective, where we aren't, because it becomes this irony where the thing that is being used to symbolically represent what to the author is the most horrific thing they can imagine, which is the destruction of individualism, from another perspective could just as easily be said to, well, this is the only hope. That the only way you get to a true community, one where people don't just say and affect like they actually care about each other, is the one where they are, in fact, they lose affectation. There's no superficial content of emotional investment. They just automatically and organically act in the collective self, in the collective universal interest, without needing to be tethered by anything. Like, the aliens in Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Yeah, they don't whimper when someone is, when a dog is run over in the streets, but they also don't have nuclear families. They also don't have nepotism. They also don't have cronyism.
Yeah, but it's hard to tell whether it extends to the point where they don't have creativity and they don't have
and so it
expression, and it
could bottom out in some eventually. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it could bottom out, but it becomes very. I don't know how to
say they are seed people that just travel from place to place. I don't necessarily know. They don't have a sustainable system, but.
Right. So I mean, that's an example where I think there's a complete displacement of the. But if you think about the time machine,
right?
Those people, remember the woman drowns, and no one jumps in to save her.
Yeah, the Eloi are so disassociated from one. They have no concept of morality or empathy.
Right. So there's an example
people.
where they have to learn it, right? And to learn that aggression for their own survival, right? So he teaches them you have to kill the
Morlock.
Morlocks. You have to kill them, hit them on the back of the neck, and they die for some reason easily if you do that. That they learn that they, well, I mean, I think there's a lot of these things talk about a balance of different parts of our being that are necessary for survival.
Right.
It's not clear, though, that I agree with you. There's nothing to say that the Invasion of Body Snatchers wouldn't live on to do. They still do business. They still do their whatever they have to do, but it's all mechanical. It's almost as if in the Stepford Wives or something. Well,
that's the thing is that all of these alien movies were not really afforded an opportunity to learn very much about how they actually exist, because that's not the point. Because obviously we never see pod people eating. Like, do they just eat fertilizer? It's like, it's like, that's the thing is that all of these things about
I think they do eat. We just never see them. The point
right, but that's the thing. What do they eat? How do they say? But this is the thing: is that all of those are important questions to the more fundamental question of, is the pod person society a more ethical way of organizing a society and ensuring the highest quality of life for all of its members? Because that becomes the thing, doesn't it? It's they have no particular attachment to any one member. I wouldn't call it ethical,
because ethical implies that you have to have some investment emotionally into the thing.
I don't think so. I think that's the.
I think the byproduct is naturally ethical in that case, but you lose.
But we just
You lose the. There's something wrong. You lose the spontaneity. You lose the aggression. Parts of things that make us human, right? So.
Right.
That's the problem. You lose and that's what, imagine, obviously it had something to do with communism at the time, right? All these things are based on something.
Red Scare.
Red Scare, where you're it's a monotonous lifestyle. There's no individuality.
And this was the thing that people would actually say in propaganda. You had American politicians and military personnel literally describing Soviet people, not just Soviet soldiers or bureaucrats or apparatchiks, but literally portraying the people themselves as if they are basically robot people. They don't know anything to do with the glories of individualism and the greatness of a democratic society. And it becomes, but which all makes it all the more eerie when you do look at a movie like The Day the Earth Stood Still. And, you know, at the end of the day, while it is a pacifistic film, it's ultimately the utopian conclusion that it comes to is ultimately one that advocates fascism, where the only way to achieve passivity or pacifism is to literally just have one almost stateless apparatus that has a monopoly of total power, and we basically just have to have faith that these rulers that are enlightened enough that they're not simply going to use that power for totally cynical ends themselves.
Right.